Thank you so much for staying on the show. Let's just zoom into that conversation about our latest inflation figures for December 2022. And we've been joined by government statistician Professor Samuel Kobna-Enim. Thank you so much, Prof, for joining us this morning. I remember the last time we had you in here, and Benjamin and yourself were discussing our inflation figures and other related matters. There was some hope, especially going to the end of the year, coming into 2023, but it looks like we've hit another record high. What exactly is contributing to this?
To all listeners, indeed, when I engaged Benjamin, we explored a number of issues, and we still remain on the track of optimism going forward. But it's important we try and define or put into context what the optimism is. So the release that we did yesterday, we keep in mind that the 54.1% is a year-on-year inflation. What that means is that we're comparing December 2021 with December 2022. So all the economic impact that we see currently, that is in the last 2 months, that is issues around exchange rate, issues around the staff level agreement, being argued that it is influencing expectation and all that, would only be seen from the perspective of month-on-month inflation. And we would all recall that since September, our month-on-month inflation went up from 2.0 to 2.7 in October 2022. And then in November 2022, it further went up from 2.7 to 8.6. And now we're seeing a month-on-month inflation dropping from an 8% rate to a 3.8 rate. So from a month-on-month basis, we see that there is about a half of the rates that we recorded in November 2022. And this is what I mean by we're still on the track on optimism, but we need to make a distinction between what you are comparing. If you are comparing it with last year, then all the gains that we are seeing in the last couple of months will not be reflected until another couple of months.
Oh, okay. That's interesting and a very important clarification. So for those who were concerned that, okay, the city was performing better and that translated into a reduction in transport fares, this explains it for you that this is a year-on-year inflation figure. But based on your own assessment and when you step out to gather data, do you see a true reflection of what the impact of the cedi's depreciation in December was?
Yes, we do see it from, I'm using the collective word, we do see it from a service point of view, from a number of perspectives. And one is, yes, prices are reducing, but in what areas are we seeing the price changes? It is important to always move away from the aggregate figure. 54.1% is the national figure. But anytime we do the release, we disaggregate it from food and non-food perspective, and also from a locally produced items and imported items perspective. From my point of view, these are very high aggregates for which any conversation should be held. The real conversation starts with when you further disaggregate it at the 13 division level and you further go down to the subclass level. So what we realize at the 13 division level is that housing, water, electricity, and gas and other fuels recorded the highest rate of inflation of 82.34%. But in food and non-alcoholic beverages, which is one of the 5 items that recorded highest inflation in December 2022, had a rate slightly higher than the national average of 54.1%. This is where we always introduce the issue of weight. Although food inflation recorded a rate much lower than housing, water, electricity, and gas, because food and non-alcoholic beverages has a weight of 43.7 out of 100%, it really pushed its contribution to about 47.5% of the 54.1 inflation that we recorded. So yes, we are beginning to see decreases across different commodities, but it's always important we keep in mind that there are 307 items in the basket for the computation, and these 307 items have different weights. So if you are seeing decreases in what I call the wrong direction, then you're not going to see its impact occurring. Then within food, we do it at a subclass level, and also we see things like vegetables and juices recording very high rates. Bus and total fares, as you indicated, at the 307 item level, has the highest rate of 5.8. So if we see decreases at the pump in terms of diesel and petrol, and it does not translate quickly to reductions in bus and total fares, or only contributes marginally in terms of decrease in bus and total fares, then that impact will not be felt. So the 2 points that I'm putting across is in what dimensions are we seeing the changes, and whether those dimensions are the items that have the highest weight, and the extent to which, if you move to the different stages of reduction, we are carrying on those reductions further down.
Interesting. We are almost approaching the middle of January. I don't know if you've already started your data collection, but what are the figures pointing to, if you've started your data collection already for January?
We have started the data collection for January, and let me indicate that we collect data for the month predominantly in the first week of the month, and it spills over sometimes to the second week. But definitely by the end of the second week of the month, we would have finished data collection representative for the month. Once the data is collected, and keep in mind that the data is collected from all our 16 administrative regions, and indeed from 8,337 outlets. So the processing occurs between the third week and the fourth week of the month. And that is what we're going to start from the 16th of this month, that is from Monday. Okay. And then by then we'll begin to see whether we are still around the 54.1% and what is contributing to that or not. So unfortunately, I will not be able to indicate what the directions are for now.
Doc, could you appreciate, but from the way things are, and from, I'm sure you are experiencing this, how fuel prices went down, how transport fares went down, is it likely, or is there the likelihood that we'll see it reflecting on how the inflation rate will be when you do the next data analysis?
This is very interesting. So now you are looking at it from a one commodity point of view, and that is what we try to avoid. You are absolutely right. Diesel has gone down, petrol has gone down, bus total fares have gone down. Let's also keep in mind that we are dealing with people who are responding to diverse expectations. So in as much as these real sectors are showing reduction, what we always have to keep in mind is our response as persons in Ghana, be it sellers, be it consumers, because what we've seen over the last 6 months is significant price variations for same items within the same geographical area. And this is something that we keep on putting to the government, that we need to begin to think about how we can address issues of expectations and issues of behavior, both from the consumer point of view and from the seller's point of view. So although these things are increasing, with all the things that is happening in the economy, let's keep an eye on how people are going to respond. Until we are able to place a figure on that, we will not be able to say that because diesel alone is going down, bus and total fares are going down, then we should also think that we should hurry and say that inflation has peaked and we're going to see a reduction of this percentage. But let's also have in mind that other commodities, even around this time, keep increasing. Yesterday during the release, we put out one thing. Of the 307 items that we have in the basket, we identified 147 items that in December 2022 recorded price variations higher than 54.1%.
What could be accounting for that? You know, because to the layperson, when things like fuel, transport fares are coming down, like all of us were saying, we expect the corresponding effect on the cost of goods and services. But if it doesn't happen, we would want to know what account for that. How can the gains here reflect in the generality of price of goods and services?
So there's one thing that I'm pretty sure we don't know as a country, because it's the responsibility of Ghana Statistical Service, and the conversation has started. And this is what we call the build-up cost. And what this simply means is that you look at it from two perspectives. if you are thinking about locally produced items, what is the build-up cost right from the farm gate to the final consumer? Until we start producing statistics on that, we wouldn't be able to identify at which stage within the value chain that does not respond or respond partially to any reduction that we are seeing. So a typical example, if we are seeing price reductions at the pumps, and it takes X number of time for bus and trotro fares to go down, and there is another factor that comes in to affect bus and trotro fares, like spare parts, and imports are also going up, wouldn't be able to determine the exact effect that the drop in the prices at the pumps would impact eventually on, let's say, the plantain that has to be transported from one geographical area to another place. So we really need to get into identifying, we all know the value chain, but identifying the build-up cost for the different stages that we go through between the farm gate and the consumer. The same applies to imported items. We don't know the build-up cost for all the imported items when they get to our ports, and also when finally it gets to our final consumer. So these are the details that one would have to use or obtain to pretty appreciate the extent to which, at the primary level, if something changes, it would eventually affect what the consumer gets. So going forward, we are working closely with the Ministry of Food and Agriculture, because they collect prices, wholesale prices at the farm gate, they collect transport prices, and we believe that this collaboration would help us get closer to identifying the build-up cost.
Well, so you said that there's something that you're doing about this. When do we expect this to come into force, so that as an ordinary person, I can then, or a business person, I can calculate to know that, okay, this is what will be the cost of doing business in Ghana because of how the inflation and the things that contribute to it are running?
So, two things. One is that from the personal point of view, we have put on our website this personal inflation calculator that you can go there either as a business person or as an individual to get a sense of how your basket responds to the price changes that we're currently experiencing in the country. But from an institutional point of view, as I indicated, we've started a conversation. We've already built a dashboard. We've exchanged data between the Ministry of Food and Agriculture and Ghana Statistical Service. What we have to get running is how the two institutions would agree on an MOU in terms of the regularity of sharing the data and the cleaning of the data, which is critical because one is wholesale data, one is retail data, and one is consumer data. Traditionally, we've used different markets in doing this exercise. So there's a lot of groundwork that would have to be done to be able to merge the two or three data points, that is the wholesale, the retail, the transport, and the consumer data, to help understand the build-up. So we're currently working with a period of about 3 to 6 months to iron out the working arrangements, then the technical team will get running. So we're giving ourselves about 3 to 6 months.
But if I want to know how my personal inflation will be, I should just go onto your website and I could do that, right?
Yes, please.
Okay, so for we're looking forward to you coming out with that inflation for you to then know whether what happened in December will reflect. When should we look forward to that one so that we can come back to have a discussion?
So let's sequence the expectation. And why we say that is between now and the 6 months that I talked about, a number of indicators would have to be put out for all of us to appreciate where we are headed. And I've told you where we are headed. Ultimately, we want to know the build-up cost. So from the import point of view, one of the things that we want to do quickly is to work closely with the Ministry of Trade and Industry. We're hoping that we will not have any bureaucracies, any institutional challenges, and begin to look at our import data more carefully from an item point of view, and then hopefully by the end of February, put the first publication out for our imports as a country. That publication would possibly have the header, our trade vulnerabilities in this country in terms of which commodities we import from single countries and which commodities we import from multiple countries, and how important are these commodities to the structure of the Ghanaian economy. Once we are able to do that, it means we've reached or we've covered the first hurdle, which has to do with the institutional arrangement to get the data. Then the second level will be to look at how that data compares with what we have at Ghana Statistical Service from the producer price perspective. So we go to the industries, we go to the service sectors to get their prices, and that is what we use for the price, producer price inflation. Then we'll start merging that. So let's incrementally look out for these products, which will say that within 6 months, indeed, we can get the product out.
Okay. All right. Prof, we are very grateful that you found time to join us on the AM show on Joy News. So that's government statistician, Professor Kwabena Enim there. He used to be at the only university of competitive choice in Ghana. I mean, when we say this, people do not agree, but yeah, that's the only university of competitive choice, University of Cape Coast. We are producing. All right. You want us to move on? So let's stay there for a while.
No, we are going back to UCC.
Okay, yeah, good.
Because we've been joined by senior lecturer at the School of Business, Seram Kawo. Good morning to you, sir. Thanks for your time.
Good morning, sir, madam.
Yes, and so while I engage you, my colleague Samuel Kojo-Brace will just quickly take us through some statistics, give us a graphic representation of what we have been talking about with the government statistician so far. And it's just right there on your screen. So Samuel, do that, and then we go to Mr. Kawo.
Okay. So we're looking at the December 2022 inflation. Let's start with headline inflation. Headline inflation, as it is on your screen, was 54.1%. Now, in terms of non-food inflation, so without food, what was the rate of change there? It was 49.9. And then, when it comes to food inflation, so the changes in your cassava, your flour, everything food, the eggs and whatever it was 59.7%. Now, let's look at the trend, the rate of change. Was it rising? Was it stagnating or was falling? If you look at it, in January 2022, it was 13.9. February 2022, it jumped to 15.7. March, it came to 19.4. In April 2022, it came to 23.6. May 2022, it was 27.6. So, Dennis, if you could see what's happening, it was rising in 2022. Now, in June, it rose to 29.8. In July, 31.7. In August, 33.9. September, it jumped to 37.2%. In October, it was 40.4. Now, at this point, a lot of people were then complaining that, I think it was around July that workers started complaining of cola, that cost of living has gone up, and so things should happen. Now, we were thinking that it could drop, but it didn't. In November, it jumped to 50.3%.
And that was a huge leap.
Exactly.
Considering the percentage at which it had been increasing from the beginning of the year, the 40%, 40.4 to 50.3, that was a huge one.
Yeah.
And then,
well, close to 10.
10 points.
It was close to 10,
Yeah.
And then in between November and December, we had somewhere around 2.7 being added on, so it jumped to 54.1. But that's when fuel prices had gone down and transport fares had been reduced, and people were expecting that there could be a change. But Prof explains that this is in comparison with what happened in December 2021. So it is now that they will be computing to know exactly what was a change, also responding to the reduction in fuel prices and to determine whether or not there was that, correlation between the reduction and the inflation rate. So that was it. Now, let's look at the December inflation trend. Now, this is for the month of December.
Just December.
Exactly. Now, if you look at it, in December 2013, yeah, the month of December 2013, it was 13.5. In December of 2014, it was 16.9. So in December, you know, we buy Christmas things, and so around that period, we all understand that things shoot up. Now, in December of 2015, it was 17.7. But in December 2016, something happened. It reduced to 15.4. In December 2017, it reduced further to 9.3. Then in December 2018, it went up by 1 percentage point 1. So it jumped from 9.3 in 2017 to 9.4 in 2018. In 2019, it reduced further from 9.4 to 7.9. Then in December 2020, it jumped again to 10.4. In December 2021, it jumped to 12.6. But look at it, huge jump from 12.6 in December 2021 to 54.1 in December 2022.
So basically what it means is that if you compare December 2022 to December 2021, it means that things got tougher. And you can see the margin, there's quite a yawning gap there between 12.6 and 54.1. Very, very interesting.
So this is how the statistics is. Maybe the economist should help us understand how this could happen. That December 2021 to December 2022, it could jump from 12.6 to 54.1. Mr. Kawo should probably help us to appreciate this better. So that's the statistics in terms of the inflation rate.
Right. So over to you, Mr. Kawo. I mean, how does this even happen? Looking at what we've just displayed year on year, and just even zooming into the month of December alone, it just makes you wonder what at all could happen in a year for it to shoot that high.
Okay. Thank you very much. If you look at the year 2022 in perspective, we have a lot of issues that came up. We came out of COVID, a lot of expenditure on COVID. Then we were hit by the Russia-Ukraine war. This Russia-Ukraine war also came up to affect global situation. We have the exchange rate fluctuating, and in 2022 it has gone up so much, and for that period, and Ghana as a country, we depend mostly on imports, and so once most of the things are imported, even those who are producing in the domestic market, they also import some raw materials and some supplies from outside the country. And all these things have affected the rate of inflation that we have seen in 2022. And looking at it, but then if you look at the explanation given by the government statistician, Prof. Enim, you would realize that the month-on-month inflation had dropped because of the measures put by government, the debt exchange issues, the staff level agreement that has come to play a role, and that had actually moved from November to December. We have almost 50% reduction in the inflation rate that we find as a country. And moreover, we have also spent so much as a country, and that also affects most of the things that we do. Now, when you look at what Prof said earlier on, that out of 307 commodities in the basket that they've been using for the calculation of inflation, we have 147 of those items having variations in the price levels of the items that they are putting up on the market in the same geographical area. And that brings about the issue of the cost build up, the pricing of the commodities that we have. And that is very interesting to hear that government, the Statistical Service is working with other government institutions to ensure that this particular thing is well done. But I'm sure, having looked at the data, they are not just going to stay there. they're going to go ahead and recommend the measures government would take to ensure that the price levels that we see in the country reflect the reality, so that market women and men will not take advantage of the situation and bring about prices to enrich themselves and pricing items without recourse to the cost build up.
Form of regulation of pricing of goods and services. I don't know what you make of that.
Yeah, so over time, we've been talking about the prices that we have in our country. Yes, we don't have price controls in the country, but then there should be some amount of regulation that before the regulation is done on how prices could be calculated, as we have been seeing in the with the oil marketing companies, because they have some regulations. Your prices must be within a particular range. That could also be extended to other players in the various industries that we have. But we need good education on how these things could be done. The industry players must be educated, the market women, the market queen, the men, all the players in the industry must be educated on how these things could be done. Otherwise, we will still have people putting prices of things anyhow, especially when it comes to the food items, from the farm gate to the marketplaces. What is the cost built up? And we hear that a lot of the people who are the producers of the goods do not really benefit from it, but then the middlemen are the ones who do most of the profits in that particular regard. So there is a lot of education that needs to be done on all the sectors and across all individuals and the players in the industry.
Now, looking at what usually happens when we get to know what the inflationary figures are already, we know that labor uses it as a tool of negotiation. What we've been told is not negotiation per se, it's bargaining. What should we expect to see in terms of how the market will react to this inflationary figure?
Okay, so it's very important for the market to look at the rate as explained by the government statistician. If the market looks at the rate at inflation being 54.1% alone, that would be very problematic, because the rate of 54.1 alone is not just for the December period, but it moves from that of December last year, 2021, to December 2022. But when you look at the month-on-month inflation, it is actually decreasing over time, almost about half of what we got in November 2002. As at December 2002, November it was around 8%, but December it moved to 3.8%, almost 50% of that particular rate. So when labor is going to negotiate, they must also take into consideration that the month-on-month inflation is also going down, and that should be factored in the negotiations that they are going to look at. Of course, the market will respond in a way that, we have seen that the times that the inflation, the exchange rate is high, transport fares are up, and the rest, they have bought a lot of the items already. And for that matter, they will want to recoup their cost during that particular time. But from December, January, as we are seeing, when these things come, when their stocks are done and they have to import other products or manufacture other products, we will see that the prices will have to be low, and that will reflect in the next level of inflation that we have. Though we cannot predict what is going to happen, but once we have seen a positive response in December, where the prices have stabilized over time, some have started coming down, that will also go into the negotiations going forward.
Interesting. So for you, not so much about what we recorded in terms of the year-on-year inflation, but the positive gains that we were able to make in December. So you're suggesting that this is not likely going to have an impact?
Yeah, so I'm not saying that we shouldn't look at the year-on-year inflation. The year-on-year inflation is very necessary for planning for businesses. So businesses that plan, some of the businesses plan for a long term, 5 years and above. And so the year-on-year is very necessary. But they must also take into account the inflation rate on the month-on-month inflation when they are looking at it, because that is going to affect the decisions the businesses are going to make.
Interesting. Now, we're also beginning to see the CD gradually lose against the dollar, even from the BOG's daily alerts or notifications that we receive. Does it worry you that we may see worse times?
For me, it is not a worry, because the forex market is not stable, it's not static, it's a dynamic market, and the Bank of Ghana is the one responsible for the forex that we have in the country. And so during December, there has been a lot of things that have been done to ensure that the rate is stable over time. The question that one needs to ask is, what happened? What changes? The Bank of Ghana, have they changed anything? Is there something that they promise they are going to do so that the price will be stable? Have they reneged on that particular issue? One of them that they have done during the period is not to provide the forex to anybody, but to essential commodities that we need in the country. Is that still applicable, or be relaxed on that particular one? We've been promised that there is a goal for oil exchange that coming within a particular period. It has been postponed. We don't know whether it is going to be feasible or possible that this thing will happen. Buying of gold within the country to stabilize the forex that we have. What happens to that particular one? These are a lot of questions that we have. And if we could not get concrete answers to them, then it will be a worrying situation altogether. But if you understand the forex market, it's a dynamic market depending on the forces of demand and supply that we have in the market. If we are still importing more, and we've said it over and over, that the issue of the import substitution that we want to create should not be on paper, but should be backed with action, where the local producers that are going to produce some of these things must be brought on board. There should be finances that are provided to them. And once these things are done and they bought into the idea, they would have produced and reached a particular level before we try to cut down on some of the imports that we are doing over time. If you look at the case of Nigeria, where they are able to produce more rice to feed their own people, then it is telling us that what we are also going to do, we cannot just say that we are stopping the importation of rice when the local market cannot feed what is being done. So we have to look at that as well.
You're saying the forex market is dynamic, but we know in this country what happens when the dollar performs so well against the CD and vice versa. It literally translates into pricing of goods, because we are a very import-driven economy. And that's why I was asking if it was going to predict any doom for us. We need to be careful how we put that particular one out. Yes, there has been an upward adjustment in the forex that we see today, but then still, let me go to the government statistician, the price built up. So what is the price built up? If we understand the price built up very well, that would not affect whatever that we are getting on the market. Of course, there are some people on the market that do not buy items on the dollar rate, but we have developed a culture of pricing almost everything we have in the country against the dollar. When the person even buys
with Ghana cedis, they will tell you that, oh, the dollar rate is up, and that is why the prices are going up. Housing, for instance, we still have housing pricing being quoted in the US dollar, and that is very worrying as a country. So we need to be cautious. Yes, the rate is appreciating over time, but then that should not go to translate into the prices that we have in the market going up. Of course, there are people who do not know anything about the forest. They don't trade in the forest. They don't buy anything in the forest. But once the news goes out, then they start increasing their prices as they are. And it is not too good for the market. We need to be very positive and ensure that those who are bringing the items, the way they also translate the cost to the wholesalers and then the final consumer must also be looked at. Of course, when we are looking at the price build-up, the increment in VAT, we shouldn't forget about that. The increment in VAT also comes in to also affect the cost of the items that we find in the market, not only the forest that we have.
And so we've seen an increase in VAT, for example. And so we will just wait to see how it goes and even plays out in the next statistics that we will receive from the Ghana Statistical Service. But let me say thank you to you, Mr. Cowell, for joining us this morning. Seram Cowell is a senior lecturer at the UCC School of Business.